Anthony O Neill is a well-respected lawyer here in Charleston and a community leader. I sit down one-on-one with Anthony for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores.
Tony O Neill, it's so good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I appreciate this greatly. So here we sit. You are obviously one of the lawyers for O Neill and Fair. Tell me, as we sit here right now, what is it like to be you?
Well, you're getting old. I mean, I've been at this for 45 years in the practice of law. And I grew up in Charleston, so I guess it's good to be me and to still be here, and to still be active and to still do something that I enjoy doing.
And you talk about active. I know you are heavily involved with a lot of activism in Charleston, and you have you speak a lot about politics around Charleston and beyond. You obviously are a household name here in Charleston. What is it like for you to sit back and see politics the way it is right now?
Well, it's an interesting thing to observe the changes brought on in the city of Charleston in the last 40 years as a result of politics. It was a little more than 40 years ago that Joe Riley came to power. The interesting fact is that between the 1970 census and the 1980 census, Charleston went from being a black majority city to a black minority city. And part of that came about because of annexation. The areas that came into the city of Charleston, they expanded beyond the peninsula. And so you had a tremendous influx of white people. Charleston's always been a fairly integrated city in terms of living patterns, and until about the 60s when things sort of went black and went white. Now in those 40 years, black people have just been displaced on the peninsula, and our numbers, our percentage has decreased in the city of Charleston itself. Now, is that a bad thing? It's not a good thing, because one of the things that made Charleston a unique city was certainly the gumbo population that we had and the gumbo living patterns that we had. And so now people go their separate ways and they get more parochial in their thinking. So that hadn't been good for the city of Charleston.
What is it like for you to see Mayor John Tecklenburg as mayor right now in your mind?
Well, let me put it to you like this. I would not want to be a guy who followed behind Joe Riley. I mean, that's a hard act to follow. And I'm not sure that Tecklenburg measures up when you compare him to Joe Riley. And that's a natural comparison, because Joe put 40 years in at the helm of this city. So I'm not even sure what the future holds for Tecklenburg in leadership. I think he's going to be challenged, and he may not be around for another term. I don't know.
And obviously, when you go back to that election, I guess almost 4 years ago to right now, what still plays in your mind about that?
Again, I had some concerns about where the city was going, and again, it's just raises such an important aspect of our lives that I was concerned about where we were going to be. And so you see the diversity that we once had is gone. It's just gone. You can't afford to live downtown anymore. Black people have been priced out. And so they certainly hadn't been run out because of racial discrimination, but they have been forced to relocate because of economic considerations. If you had a house on the east side of Charleston that, let's say, 20 years ago you might have been happy to get $35,000, well, you can get $380,000 for that house now. So that puts pressure on families to sell, to take that money and divest. And people have moved away, and large families have dispersed, and nobody's coming back. And so you go on the east side now, and there's a different complexion over there.
And obviously, you know, when you talk about, obviously, you know, diversity in Charleston, you always talk about affordable housing. Where are we with that discussion in your mind?
You're gonna have to look under a rock to find some affordable housing, because it's certainly not in plain view. I mean, it's not available. And you see, there's some discussions about affordable housing for the population that serves in restaurants and hotels downtown. It is not there. So, you know, they have to move to West Ashley, move to North Charleston, you gotta commute, the traffic is just hell. I mean, it's terrible.
And obviously, you know, there's so much going on now with elections and politics. Let me take you to Washington. When I say President Donald Trump, you say?
A disaster.
When I say Paul Manafort, you say?
Part of the continuing disaster. I mean, that the whole crew that's in Washington now, instead of draining the swamp, I think Trump has stocked the swamp. I mean, you got a president that people say, fact checkers say, he tells at least 7 lies a day. I guess all presidents lie from George Washington on, but not at the rate and not at the ridiculous stuff. I mean, yesterday he came up with a thing saying if he were impeached, everybody would be poor. That's just that's a crazy statement. Crazy statement. I think our country would be better off much after he's gone. He's a racist.
And obviously, Governor McMaster, this current governor of South Carolina, is an ally of the president.
Well, it's unfortunate because people who support Trump, I don't support, I can tell you that.
And let me talk more about the gubernatorial race here in South Carolina. I know that obviously James Smith is the Democratic nominee of the party for the governor's race. When you think of him, what sticks out in your mind?
Well, I think he'll probably be a welcome change. I think he brings a fresh perspective, fresh leadership, and it's just, he brings hope.
Okay. And obviously here in Charleston, and really the first congressional district, you have the race between Democrat Joe Cunningham and Republican Katie Arrington. And still people are talking about how Mark Sanford lost his first race. Can you tell me how that happened in your mind?
I can tell you the easy answer, he got less votes than Katie Arrington. I like Mark Sanford. I know him personally. I like him very well, in fact. And when he ran early on for the Congress, I supported him. But then Mark went too far to the right for my taste. But I'm probably too far to the left for his taste. So I still like him. We disagree. We agree to disagree politically.
And obviously now when you think of the downtown area and you come back here to Charleston, a lot of people are still talking about that June 14th slavery resolution vote that the Charleston City Council passed. Where were you emotionally with that?
I think it was a good thing. It's not going to change. Didn't change the tenor of things overnight. But until you can make certain admissions, you can't ever, I'll say, cure what folk like to call the original sin. You have to make the admission that it was wrong before you can move on. So from that standpoint, I think it was a good thing. I think it was certainly high time that we did that. Our future is going to be that we move forward together as a people. It's getting more difficult to do because we lost so much diversity. But to the extent that we can marshal those diverse attitudes and those diverse philosophies into a productive mold, then we can continue to make progress as a people in this city.
What is the state of diversity right now?
I don't understand that question any more than to say we are not as diverse as we once were. And I don't think that there's a thirst for it because again, I think this administration has given new currency to racism and racist attitudes. So you got to be willing to get beyond that.
And let me get back to you. Obviously, you, like I said, you're a household name. You're a lawyer here. You said 45 years in law. What memories still stick out in your mind 45 years later about you being a lawyer?
I really sort of came to it late in terms of deciding to be a lawyer. When I was growing up, I knew that Bernard Fielding was a lawyer. And I gave a talk about him recently. I used to hang out on my corner of Spring and Ashley, and he would come by in the afternoon, and little fellas we would be hanging around and say, "Oh, that's Noddy Fielding, he's a lawyer." That didn't mean a lot to me. And unfortunately, my image for lawyers at that time was Calhoun on the Emerson and Andy show. It was just an awful caricature. So then later on, when I went to work for Caterpillar in Peoria, my wife and I went to get an apartment, and when we got there, they decided that the apartment was not available. Her complexion was a whole lot darker than mine. So as soon as they saw her, they didn't have the apartment. So I went to Caterpillar, and they said, "Look, get a lawyer, and we're going to join you. We're going to bring a lawsuit to put an end to this." So I did, and I hired a guy named Joe Billy McDade, a 6'5" African-American lawyer who went to Bradley University. He was a basketball stand-up. And so we filed a case, we won the lawsuit, and he suggested to me that I consider being a lawyer. So I owe Joe McDade the push to decide to go to law school and then to come back home.
And when you look at politics 6 months to a year from now, what will you say about it?
I don't know what I'll say about politics 6 months from now. I'm hoping that in November, I'll be saying, my goodness, we certainly brought some change to the national government, and hopefully that can trickle on down in terms of attitudes, in terms of philosophies, in terms of a willingness to do things that benefit all people in this country, white folk and black folk. I guess my overall hope is that we can live out the dream that Martin Luther King spoke about, many, many years ago.
Well, the Honorable Tony O Neill, Anthony O Neill, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. Yes, sir. Yeah.